accessed the podcast of OA. Located deep within Sector 14845 and powered by the Emerald Light of Will, the podcast of OA is your guide to the Green Lantern universe. Hosted by Lantern Myron Rumsey, the podcast of OA begins now.
Welcome, everyone, to a brand new episode of the podcast of OA. After a bit of a hiatus, we're back with episode number 203. I'm your co-host, Myron Rumsey, and in this episode, we're going to be talking some DC versus vampires and Dark Knights of Steel. And I am so happy to be talking to my good buddy, Phil Bova. Phil, my friend, it is so great to hear your voice again.
It is, man. It's been a long time. Merry Christmas and Happy New Year to everybody. I hope everyone had a great holiday season. I hope everyone's staying safe, especially in these trying times again. But I'm glad to be back with you, man. It's been a while, and I'm ready to get into it.
Absolutely. You know, I do want to explain a little bit of the reasons why we've been kind of away for a little bit. And it all kind of falls on me, and it's my fault essentially. But I got really, really sick right after we recorded our last episode, and after we published it, and it was right around Thanksgiving, and it wasn't COVID, but it was a cold that settled in my lungs and throat area, which is always kind of a weak spot for me because of my birth defect, and I couldn't talk for 4 or 5 days, and I was sick from right around the end of December or the end of November through the middle of December. And then, of course, we had the wave of the holidays, and I had 3 people in my life, 2 family members and a friend, all get diagnosed with cancer right around the same time. So I was just in a funk between being not feeling so good and having that happen, and then the rush of the holidays. There just wasn't time to get together and do it justice. So I do apologize for the absence of time and the length of time we've been not providing any content to our fellow Green Lantern fans.
Maybe everyone was enjoying their Merry Christmases and their Happy New Years and whatnots. And, maybe the nice winter break was for all of us. But I do miss being on the air.
Yeah. Yeah, me too. It wasn't a good time except for the holidays. Was Santa good to you, Phil?
Santa was very well to me, and Santa was very well to Clark, as I knew he would be.
That's awesome.
And it was a great Christmas. I don't know. I had a hard time when Sunday came, because we went back on the 3rd. And Sunday I think I was depressed all day.
I can testify. And,
yeah. It was tough, man. Monday getting back to work was this week has been rough, but like Monday, I just wasn't feeling it, and I really, really, honestly, I missed Clark a lot. I just loved being around him the whole time.
It's great when you've got a young one at the holiday season. There's just so much magic in the holiday. It adds so much to it that, it's great. And I do want to give a special shout out. I got a package in December from Ian Harrington, who we had on the show back when we were doing the Know Your Core segments, and he produced the motion comic of the Larfleeze Christmas special. He did that really cool original Rotlot Van audio drama a while ago, and he sent me a custom-made, handmade Green Lantern stocking, which was really cool.
Awesome. Very cool.
Big kudos out there for that, because I believe it or not, I didn't have a Christmas stocking, so I finally had one to hang up. But we're of course very much behind on our comic book coverage, so we thought this episode we'd get caught up with DC versus Vampires and Dark Knights of Steel, since their January issues just came out not too long ago, and that'll get us current with them. So I'm really excited to talk about both those books.
Yeah, great titles.
Absolutely. So in terms of Green Lantern news, even though there's been a bit of time since the last episode, there's not much really going on. The only thing that I can think of in terms of Green Lantern news, or real Green Lantern news, that has come out is that the World's Finest, the collection quarterly subscription box based on DC Comics properties, their spring box is going to be based on Blackest Night, which is kind of cool.
Very cool.
Hopefully it's better than the Green Lantern box they did a couple of years ago. That was not a good box. The production quality was pretty shoddy. It looks like, based on what they kind of released, is silhouetted images of what's going to be in the box. It looks like there's going to be a t-shirt. I think there's going to be a set of coasters with the various logos of the Corps on it. It looks like a water bottle, perhaps an Atrocitus figure. At least that's what the shape makes me think of, is Atrocitus, and maybe a patch. There's a round shape that doesn't really give you an idea what it is. It just says it's an accessory. And then there's an item that looks like it might be a power ring. So might be some cool swag.
They really upped the ante on that box as opposed to the last one, huh?
Yeah. I mean, the last one, I think they were really ambitious because they tried to come up with a Green Lantern power battery USB hub. The problem was the hub didn't work. You plugged in one USB item and it worked, but when you plugged in a second, it stopped working. And the vinyl figure was pretty rough. So there were some production issues with that box, and they admitted it. It was interesting. They sent me a free box for that one, and I reviewed it and did a YouTube review, and they watched it. Apparently, the entire office watched it because I kind of really, I wasn't mean, but I was very honest in my assessment of it, and I felt like anybody who bought it got ripped off. And I felt, honestly, because I was promoting the box, I felt like, geez, I encouraged people to spend their money on it, and it wasn't good. So, but.
They made their whole office watch it, huh?
Yeah. After the video came out, the contact I had at the company emailed me and said, "Hey, we want to let you know we made everybody in the production team watch your review because you were exactly right."
That's funny.
So,
go you, man.
Speaking of YouTube, I'm going to be doing some YouTube stuff this year. That's one of my I don't want to say New Year's resolutions, but one of my goals for this year is to do a lot more video stuff. Now that my office is rearranged, I'm going to do a tour of the Lantern Cave, and I've got a couple of things that I've bought that I have not shown too much to anybody yet, and I want to do some product review videos of those. One is a very rare collectible from South America, which I can't wait to show people.
Nice, man, nice.
So I'm looking to do some more of that YouTube type stuff this year. So that'll be fun. But other than that, there's not really a lot of Green Lantern news going on. It was pretty quiet over the holidays. No more news on the HBO show. No news on the Green Lantern Corps movie that we hope is going to get made someday. No real comic news other than things are going along as they are with the Jeff Thorne run. Everything is solicited through March, and March is the last issue of the first arc. So we'll see. I'm interested in seeing what the April solicitations look like.
So is he contracted to do two seasons or one?
From what I understand, he's contracted for one, but they have the option of going further. So
we can hope that March will be his last book.
Yeah, that's what I'm hoping. We'll see if April solicitations are an April Fool's gift. I don't know. We'll see. I've heard some rumors. And we'll talk about them a little bit later on. But we'll see. But anyway, I can't wait to dive into some comics. How about you?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. So we'll be back in a few minutes. Phil's going to do a Know Your Core segment, our first one of 2022, and then we'll be back.
This is Salak, Green Lantern of Sector 1418, and you are receiving the podcast of Oa.
The podcast of Oa.
Welcome back, fellow Owens, to another segment of the Know Your Core. And this week, we have a character by the name of Lysandra. Lysandra's first appearance was in Green Lantern Volume 2, number 168, September 1983. Created by Jack C. Harris and Jerome Moore. Lysandra hails from Space Sector 0047. Her home planet is Zinda. Lysandra was from Zinda, an icy world settled eons ago by the survivors of a space war. In the years since, their law against returning to the stars evolved into a religion. To even gaze at the stars was considered blasphemy. Even though her religion forbade her, Lysandra could not help but feel the call of the stars. One night she looked up to see a blazing green star fall from the sky. The visitor from space was the Green Lantern of Sick, mortally wounded during a battle in deep space. He knew of the ways of Zinthas people, who fear and shun space travelers. He knew Lysandra was without fear to aid him. Dying, he passed the ring onto Lysandra, along with the knowledge of the power. And there you have it, fellow Owens, another cool segment of the Know Your Core.
And welcome back, Green Lantern fans, and we're going to do a doubleheader of DC vs. Vampires, issues number 2 and 3. And this is James Tynion and Otto Schmidt doing the art. And this, boy, I tell you, this really picked up. You know, if you thought the first issue where Hal is revealed as a vampire and he makes a Zan smoothie, if you thought that was something, boy, issue 2 and 3 have a couple of punchlines at the end of those issues as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was an intense issue. And you know, it's funny because after reading this, you know, you really, really get a sense of James Tynion's writing. I mean, it's him. I mean, he's just such a good writer anyway. But like, after I read and made it through this issue, I was like, man, you can really, really pick up his writing style.
Yeah, I have not read a lot by him, so this has been a real pleasure for me. And I always take these kind of books like not seriously. I mean, I know there are people that are like, wow, you know, he killed Zan, and some of the things that go on in these issues 2 and 3, some people were a little bent out of shape over how certain characters got treated, but I'm looking at it like it's an Elseworlds, and this isn't anything to be taken too seriously. And you know, in this issue, right off the bat, in issue number 2, Hal takes down Anton Arcane, who is a Swamp Thing villain. Right off the bat, you know, taking off a magic character, and you know, magic has never been really a strong suit for Green Lanterns.
Yeah, rips his spine out. Then he's talking with the man behind the scenes.
Yeah, and you know, to me so far that's the biggest mystery. I'm enjoying the revelations about some of the characters that we find out what happens to them and their fate, and I love seeing Hal being so deliciously evil. How deliciously evil is he? As delicious as a Zan smoothie. But not knowing who the big bad is in this is what's killing me, because there really haven't been any clues. And you know how I am. I'm reading every little thing, looking for any kind of clue that can give me an idea who it is. And obviously the person knows that Green Lantern is Hal, but that could have been found when he or she turned Hal. I almost get the impression that it's somebody who's not powered, because they talk about how, you know, we have to deal with the superheroes. It talks about them almost as if this person is not one of them. So I don't know. I don't know if this is not a hero. I don't know. I mean, it's got to be somebody we've seen before, because it wouldn't be a shocking twist. You wouldn't have a reason to hide the identity of who the big bad is if it wasn't somebody that comic readers would know.
Okay, well, what if it's Lex Luthor?
That he faked his death?
Could be.
It's possible. I mean, his blood is supposedly the cure, but that could have been all faked. It's possible. It was funny. I was talking about it with my wife and my son. I was sharing with them the plot, because my wife read the first issue and was really gotten engrossed in it, and she hasn't read these 2 yet. And we were talking about the issues, and I was thinking, boy, wouldn't it be awesome if it was Alfred? But
no, it couldn't be Alfred though.
Well, I don't know, because I mean, Alfred has kind of drank the tea, but did he fake it? But then we find out that Batman had the hot water boiler blessed, and that would have killed him. I thought, boy, wouldn't that have been cool? But if I were Alfred and I were the big bad, Batman would be the first person I'd be going after.
Right. Yeah, I don't think it's Alfred. I don't know, man.
I don't know.
But if you know anything about James Tynion, it's going to be one of those reveals. You're going to be like, what the F? You know,
right?
Kind of like the end of this issue.
Yeah. Oh, I know. This was crazy. I mean, you have this scene, and I love. I know as much as you and I rib on the Batman side of the DC universe and how much it's overused. I did like the interactions of the Bat family, and as they're finding out that they've all been given holy water and go through these tests. I did find it interesting and enjoyable, especially the part when when Damien spills his hot chocolate because he's a little upset, and then he asks Alfred for more hot chocolate.
Yeah, it was they riff off one another really well in that scene.
Yeah, yeah. And then the scene with the villains where Green Arrow kind of comes out, and we realize now Green Arrow is not one of them because he outs every man here. And
the scene was cool too, by the way.
Yeah, it was very cool. But we get we obviously know now that Green Arrow is on the side of the humans, which kind of makes it interesting because I remember back in the first issue, I suspected him to be a vampire simply because they made it seem like he was hunting the individual, the vampire from the first issue. But that obviously is not the case. And we find out more that, Black Canary isn't turned either. In fact, she has an interaction with Damien and gets a blood sample. So it's I don't know, it's just interesting. But when you get to the end of this, when the Justice League is together and Jaina shows up and she's like, I can't feel him there anymore, and Hal's like all sympathetic, and I'm like, oh, that is so evil.
Yeah. Jerk move, man.
Yeah, he's like, oh, good. And then he's like trying to separate her from the herd because she's like, I got to go find him, and he's like, well, can I go with you? Because if they'd have gone together, she'd have ended up missing too.
Yeah, right.
And then Booster Gold acts like a real jerk.
As always.
It was really cool. And then you get to the end, and what an awful scene, really, between Hal and Barry.
It's depressing.
It's depressing, but it's also, like you can almost feel sympathetic for Hal because, as the panel is, the book issue, the issue ends, I wanted to conquer the world with you. And he ends up having to kill Barry because of his metabolism.
But it's going to make for a unique interaction when Green Arrow finds out about it,
Oh yeah. Yeah. And, I'm not real familiar with Otto Schmidt's artwork, and I liked it. There were, one of my pet peeves is the white boots. So there were 2 panels with the white boots in this issue, and I was like seething. It's like, you got the boots wrong.
I wonder why they do that with certain panels. I wonder if it's something that's an oversight.
It's got to be. It always bothers me because it's like, you don't see Batman having white boots, or Superman, or the Flash, or it doesn't happen very often. But why is it always Green Lantern?
It's only those 2 panels when they're sitting there on that beach area.
Yeah, yeah. And it's interesting because he sits down to have a heart to heart with Barry.
Right.
And he's like, I wanted you. I argued to save you. And then he kills him, snaps his neck. And he can just, Hal's not happy about it, but he's also not overly distraught yet.
Yeah, exactly. As is evident by the next issue.
Yeah, yeah. So that was issue 2. And then issue 3 picks up kind of right where it left off, where they're on the beach and Hal's like, I don't understand who could have done this to him. And he almost overplays his hand a bit there, but he's all upset that Barry's gone, and he's trying to order everybody. You got to figure out who this is. We got to get to the bottom of this now. Whoever it is going to pay. Kind of overplaying his hand, but it's interesting and ironic and kind of funny to see him play this way.
It is, and I'm surprised that Batman, okay, so, Batman being the smart guy that he is, I'm surprised he doesn't pick up on that.
I almost wonder if this is because in this issue, he obviously makes some conclusions. I kind of wonder if this is where he got tipped off a little bit. I don't know.
Who, Batman?
Yeah. Because the one thing, as I'm reading this, the one thing I find fault in is Batman would be one of the first ones I'd take off the table. I'd either get him on my side or I'd kill him. He'd be one of the first ones.
Yeah. And
I don't want this to devolve into Batman's the one person who gets, who solves this thing, because we've had that ad nauseum. So I'm really hoping we don't get that.
He does it all the time.
Yeah, I know. It's like, and the other thing that bothered me a little bit is I'm thinking, well, what about Superman? Because would Superman know that Hal's heart isn't beating?
That's a good point, unless he's not listening for it.
Right. That's what I'm thinking is maybe he's tuning that stuff out. And he's so optimistic he wouldn't think that Hal's turned. So maybe he's not checking.
But you would think in the heightened tension that's going on here with this all-out war with the vampires, everybody's suspect. You know, and you get the sense of that when they're running around on all these issues. It's like, are you a vampire? The vampires are chasing me. You'd think that everybody would be, you know, under the spotlight.
Yeah. I liked artistically the subtle, I shouldn't say subtle, but the neat way that Otto Schmidt draws Plastic Man in this opening sequence, because his arms are hanging down. Like, Plastic Man is so distraught, he's not working at trying to keep his shape. He's relaxed to the point he's so depressed that his arms are hanging down to the ground. His chin is hanging down lower than usual. Even as they walk away, his arms are dragging in the sand.
Is that Hal's hand on Batman's shoulder?
Yeah, yeah.
What a douche.
He puts his hand on Batman's shoulder. Is like, who could have done this to him? It's so delightfully evil. You know, it is. I'm loving it because it's not air quote our Hal. It's another version of Hal in the Omniverse. But boy, is it's on point, and it's fun. It really is fun.
It is, and at least we're getting something about Hal Jordan,
right?
And it's enjoyable.
It's kind of the most fun I've had with the DC universe in a while, to be honest.
This one and the other book.
Yeah. And the scene with the rat catcher is interesting because the rat catcher is being chased by vampires. Batgirl shows up. He thinks Batgirl's one of them. Batgirl gets into a fight. Nightwing shows up, and Nightwing and Batgirl are flirting, and rat catcher's just sitting there going, "Are you two seriously doing this now?"
And then we move on to the sewers with poor Jaina and Batman.
Yeah. And they find, ultimately Batman finds the Wonder Twin power ring, or not power ring, but the Wonder Twin ring. And, this is where the clues really kick in for Batman, because Batman realizes that whoever killed Zan used light as a weapon.
Right.
So it's a tip off. We saw back in issue 1 when Hal basically did away with the two characters he killed in the first issue, that he was cleaning it up in the Justice League headquarters, and Batman's kind of onto that now. What did you think about the scene with Zatanna and the Penguin?
It was comical. I mean, but then again, the Penguin's always comical, man, whenever he's running around. I didn't know Zatanna. I didn't think she was a vampire yet.
Yeah, this is the first we saw her, and the Penguin's running away from vampires, and he thinks that they're trying to turn him, and she's like, no, sometimes a girl just wants to eat some junk food right before she gobbles them,
Poor Cobblepot. A very hideous looking one, too.
Yeah, he's channeling Batman's Returns, I tell you.
It does look like Danny DeVito, you're right.
But the look on Zatanna is her face when she first interacts with him. You can see the sly look in her face, in her eyes. And then she turns around and the fangs pop out. It's great.
Yep.
And then the part that had a lot of people talking was the scene on the beach between Hal and Wonder Woman. And there was some consternation thinking, well, how could Hal have hypnotized Wonder Woman? But it's interesting because she's there on the beach and you don't really know what she's thinking, but Hal shows back up and they're talking about it, the whole situation with Barry. And she realizes that Hal is talking about Barry in the past tense and she's not. And so she's beginning to suspect. And then she puts the lasso on Hal, and Hal doesn't, he doesn't hold back. He's not fighting to keep the truth from her. He's telling her the truth, what's going on. And then that kind of breaks her heart. And you can see that panel where Diana says, I was having a hard time believing I lost one friend today, and now I know that I've lost two. And you see the look on her face, and she's vulnerable at that point because she's lost two people that were dear to her, realizing that Hal's been turned, And Hal seduces her and bites her neck, which I thought was a great scene.
I did think it was really cool. The shading makes it look like he's not even biting her.
Yeah, the way it was shaded there, you're right. I thought it was a neat scene. Some people had problems with the fact that Wonder Woman was turned. I thought it was great, and they've got to make a move. If obviously the clock is ticking, and they've got to move forward with their plan. And Wonder Woman is a great person to get on the other side of the fence.
Yeah, she is key player.
Yeah. I thought it was such a neat scene. I kind of wish that had been how it ended, but instead, we find out more with Ollie and the Black Canary, and then the real shocker is when they go back to the Justice League headquarters and they're having a meeting, and they've called it without Batman and without obviously Dinah and Ollie because they're missing, and the issue ends with Wonder Woman and Hal walking in, and Wonder Woman saying that Batman killed Barry Allen. I was like, oh man.
And it's like, you think right there'd be some kind of moment of Superman, like, I don't know. Again, this is going to bring up with your point. Wouldn't he know that they're dead?
Right. And I just don't know whether because he doesn't have any reason to believe that they're turned, he's not suspicious at all. But I just think what a great way, they know that Batman might be getting onto them. So what a great way is to cast aspersions against Batman.
Yeah, no kidding. It was a good ploy.
Now, the one thing I thought was really odd is when you look at the scene when they're starting to meet in Justice League headquarters, Aquaman is flying. Did I miss something? Because he's like floating in the air.
Well, maybe yeah. I didn't know he could fly.
Yeah, he's like floating above the table. I just thought it was odd.
Maybe it's he was supposed to be swimming.
Yeah, I don't know.
maybe wherever they're at is actually underwater.
Good cover. You would win no prize.
No, man, it's spitballing here.
But I just loved it. I loved how it ended. They walk in. It's interesting because Wonder Woman isn't even looking down. She's not making eye contact, and neither is Hal. Which you might suspect if this was, if they really did find evidence that Batman did it. But it's setting up. What's that?
They kind of cast their eyes away. They kind of cast their eyes away a lot, don't they?
Yeah. So it's interesting, and I'm interested in seeing what happens next. This book has just been a lot of fun. I'm sure at some point Hal's going to get outed, and he's the lieutenant. He's not the big bad, so he's got to go sometime before we get to the finale. But we're 3 issues in out of a 12-issue miniseries, and I am loving this thing.
Mm-hmm. It's got a ways to go.
Yeah.
And it stays consistently good too.
Right.
I mean, the first 3 issues, bam, bam, bam. They've all been consistently good.
They've all had shocking moments. They've all had like a little bit of cliffhanger endings, some twists and turns that you don't see it's coming, and that's what is making it so fun.
Yep, that's James Tynion, man, good writer. Much like Tom Taylor. Tom Taylor was a good writer like that too. Yep.
And speaking of Tom Taylor, when we come back, we're going to be talking about Dark Knights of Steel.
Woohoo! This is becoming one of my faves.
Listen up, all you white circles. This is Drill Instructor Kilowog, and you're listening to the podcast of Oa. And don't you forget it, boozers.
All right, fellow Owens, welcome back. Myron, this time we're going to be talking about issues number 2 and 3 of Tom Taylor's Dark Knights of Steel, which I'm going to add is probably my favorite book out there right now with DC.
Yeah, both of these series we've been talking about in this episode have been just enjoyable, and it's interesting that they're both Elseworlds tales that are doing unique spins on things. They're doing things with the characters that are unexpected and enjoyable and very much on point. But yeah, this has been another fun series. And we obviously in the first issue, we saw Jor-El get killed, and this deals with the fallout of that, this first issue. And there's interesting things happen. We see Batman go after Ollie, and Ollie's shooting arrows at him, and Batman literally disarms him.
Which is really cool when he caught that one meant for Alfred.
Yeah, I thought that was cool. And then, the section that is interesting to us as Green Lantern fans is the Green Man shows up at the Kingdom of Storms and talks to Constantine, and we still only get a little glimpse of the Green Man. And I don't think, as much as there's an implication that it might be Hal, I don't think it's Hal.
No? Who do you think it could be?
I think it could be Alan Scott. I think it could be the Martian Manhunter. I think it could be Abin Sur. I mean, you look at the barefoot. He's barefoot, and he's got kind of these raggedy strips hanging down.
But it's a different take in medieval times on a Green Lantern character.
It's very possible. I one of the things that makes me think there's two things that make me think it's not Hal. One, it'd be obvious, so why hide it? Two, there was some artwork that came out that kind of showed the Dark Knights of Steel universe, Dark Knight of Steel's universe, and you can see some of the characters, and you could see Hal, and he didn't look like that at all. He didn't have bare feet, but that could be misdirection.
Could be. He's the Green Man, though.
Yeah,
the Green Man. Hey, it could be their version of Merlin.
Yeah. It's really hard to say. There hasn't been enough information given. We just know there's a ring involved, and there's green energy.
Right. All right, and then we go to the Kingdom of the Sun. Is that the Kingdom of the Suns, right? Is that what this place is called?
Well, there's the Kingdom of Storms.
Kingdom of Storms.
Yeah.
That's where we're at now. That's what this, the Black Adam character, correct?
Yep. You mean Black Lightning?
Black Lightning, sorry. Whoops. So, the one thing I want to point out about this book is the character placement. So we always talk about the Elseworld stuff, right? And Tom Taylor has this unique way of taking these characters and putting them in different places that it's unique to it. He did the same thing with Injustice, just all about these character placements and where they fit in to the overall story arc. Much like this one, with being the House of L, and then of course, introduce Amazon Island on here, when they get involved. And it really, really fits into the whole complete narrative of a medieval context,
Yeah, they make it fit. I mean, obviously Harlequin is an actual Harlequin, makes so much sense.
Right.
And she's still somewhat the comic relief. Some of the comments that she makes are really pointed, but funny.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, you go to Amazon Island, which is what he's calling Themyscira, and Lois Lane shows up, shares the news about what's going on, and then has to tell Zala Jor-El that Jor-El's been dead, been killed. And she loses it.
She does. She gets peeved.
Big time. In this one, she does some nasty stuff. But it's neat. Before we see what she does, we see kind of the dungeon below in the House of L. And you see some interesting cameos. I mean, Oliver Queen's there in jail, essentially. But you see Barry Allen running around in a cell. And you see the Blue Devil. And you see the Shark.
Blue Devil, okay. And
you see Aquaman, I think. Maybe not. He's somebody with webbed hands. I'm thinking is their version of Aquaman. And I'm not sure who the other character is.
The guy with the wings?
Oh yeah, I didn't see that. Okay, I didn't even see the wings. Good catch.
I don't know who that is either.
Yeah, could that be Hawkman?
It would be a version of a Hawkman, I guess.
That might be. Oh, and you see Detective Chimp too. That was the other one.
Detective Chimp, the character that just pops up randomly. So at this time, it looks like the Arrow lost his arm.
Yep. Yep, Batman
or
chopped off
should
his
we
arm.
say the Robin Hood? I guess it's their Robin Hood.
Yeah, kind of. You're right. But then we see the results of Kara's actions. She kills Black Lightning's son, which was a brand new character just created for the story, just to be killed off.
Little dark.
Yeah, a little dark, but she drops him from the sky, and really, that was the shocking cliffhanger of this issue. That, when he tries to attack her, she just says it tickles, and she flies away. And now, war is on. Now, I mean, there's no going back for these characters at this point.
Right, man. Everybody's involved.
Yeah. But then when we get to issue 3, we see something coming from the stars. It's green, which, again, I got all excited for a second thinking, oh, maybe it's the Green Man and maybe this is what's going on. But it's not the case. It's kryptonite.
Kryptonite. Lame.
And we see the Metal Men.
And we get to see the Metal Men.
And Kara does a number on the Metal Men. She's taking no prisoners.
Bye-bye, Metal Men.
Yeah. They're now the scrap Metal Men. But then then Jefferson shows up on Amazon Island and tries to set foot on the island, which nearly causes an international incident.
It really does, man. They really, really capped that one off quickly, didn't they?
Yeah. But, it's interesting because it puts Hippolyta in a really rough spot, because we see in the last issue that Kara and Wonder Woman have a relationship. But yet Hippolyta and the Amazons have a peaceful relationship, an alliance with Jefferson and the Kingdom of Storms. And so when he comes asking them to stand up against the House of L, boy, does it put Wonder Woman in a precarious position, because she's torn. She's in love with somebody from the House of L, and her family's, pledged to support the other side. Zala.
Which causes the big rift between her and her mom.
And I keep saying Kara, it's Zala. My mistake.
It's okay, man. It happens. So then Wonder Woman flies off to prevent war.
Wonder Woman on a Pegasus. I mean, come on.
You got it, man. It's cool looking.
And then you get the shocker of this issue where Zala shows up to confront Jefferson on his ship. And she destroys the ship and him along with it. The king is dead.
That's right. Bye-bye, Jefferson. I'll tell you what, though. People are dropping like flies. But it makes sense for that time frame, right? I mean, it's like... there was so much infighting going on back then. You didn't know who to trust, who was going to get killed.
Yeah. And, and then this comes up with the revelation at the end where they find the kryptonite, and Batman, because he's half Kryptonian, reacts to the kryptonite.
Does. Poor Alfred. It's time you learn the truth, Bruce. Because on the next issue, we get to hear the secret history of Batman.
And I know you can't wait for that.
I cannot. I will say this. I'm interested in his character within the confines of this particular story arc. How's that? But this particular book, I'll even take it further. And that's all I'll say.
Yeah, I'm interested because there's apparently more to the story than what we already know. We know that Jor-El and Martha had a thing, but apparently there's more to it, because he's trying to tell Alfred, and Alfred's like, I already know. I know all of it, and it's time you learn the truth. So what truth is there beyond the truth we already thought we knew?
Other than the fact that Alfred slept with Martha?
Right. What else is there?
I know. I wonder what other bastard kids are out there.
Right.
Alfred, you hussy.
Jor-El, man, he was a player.
Oh man, great issues. These are fun.
Yeah, it's kind of a sad state of affairs when you're having more fun with these kind of Elseworldsy. I know Elseworlds doesn't exist anymore, but these other Omniverse tales than you are with the actual DC universe. But they're really fun. They're different spins on the characters.
They do. The writers do unique things with them, and it's stuff that you wouldn't normally think of, but makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've got some listener feedback. My power ring is blinking, but before we do, I want to talk a little bit. We're in a new year, so I thought we kind of missed out on doing anything over the holidays. So as we're looking forward and looking ahead in 2022, what are your wishes and predictions for 2022? What do you want to see happen with Green Lantern?
Well, I want a better book. I mean, I'm not going to sit here and rail against Thorne and say he's this terrible, terrible person and blah, 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 this and that. But like, at the same time, I've read enough Green Lantern to know that this man doesn't know his characters. I'm just not buying it. And while I understand he might fit a certain niche, and that there are fans out there of the way he's writing and doing the book, it's not for me. It's just I'm doing it because I'm doing it right now because it's Green Lantern content, and I do genuinely want to stay within the know on what's kind of happening with the characters, but I also want a better book out of it. After this one's done, that would be one wish I'd have. Predictions. I predict that DC is maybe it's not so much the comic books, but I predict that DC is going to get in some trouble this year. I just don't. If you're on social media enough, you get the temperament of the fans to see what kind of trend is moving in the right direction, and I mean the one New Year's resolution I had, and I put it out on Twitter after on the first was, to end the Snyderverse, to end the hashtag Save the Snyderverse, because it's time to get past that. I mean, it's time to put it to an end. You all got what you wanted out of it, and it happened, and you should be thankful. And that's it. I mean, I don't think WB is going to do anything more with anything of that. I think they're well past it. But I see where I see certain trends where DC's going, and I'm just a little worried about what their plans are, because it doesn't seem to me like they have an encompassing plan. And I hate to say this because I'm comparing it to the Marvel Cinematic Universe, only because Marvel has this ingenious way of, even when they have their spin-offs, they may not be tied directly, but they're tied in a way that shows the connective tissue that all these universes coexist, and all these characters have a relation to one or another. And what happens in one thing has consequences elsewhere. And I feel like that's good storytelling. I don't think it's lazy storytelling. I feel like it's really, really good storytelling, because it keeps a coherent narrative involved. And my wish is that DC would attempt to try to do something like that, but I just don't think. I think that's wishful thinking, because I don't know what their direction they have, and I think they're just concentrating on standalone stuff and self-contained worlds, and I'm not sure I understand if that's on purpose or if it's because they don't know what to do anymore. But
I don't think there's a grand vision.
Yeah, and and Kevin Feige has that. I mean, he has a vision. I mean, you got to have somebody that has the mind that can put these things together. I mean, we're talking like even the minuscule steer, like Hawkeye. Yeah, sure, Hawkeye's not going to make a gajillion dollars like Endgame did, but at the same time, Hawkeye offers a certain something to that fan base, number one, but it also has tie-ins to the overall universe that, hey, I might want to go watch this now because they mentioned this, and it just, you lead your fans to other things, and all these little breadcrumbs you put out there, and I feel like you can pick up fans along the way in doing that kind of narrative style, and I don't feel DC has that kind of mentality.
I think DC had someone like a Kevin Feige and Jeff Johns, right, but they kind of ruined it because they didn't give him the authority to kind of be in charge of the universe. They still played studio mentality from their interactions and their influence on the Green Lantern film to how they tampered with Man of Steel, how they tampered with Batman versus Superman, how they tampered with Justice League. And I think if they had just entrusted DC Entertainment to make the DC movies and just give them a pot of money and say, here, go do what you're doing and self-fund yourself after we've given you this pot of money, they might have gotten somewhere. But there is no unifying vision at this point. And I think the same way about DC Comics. I don't see any leadership. For all of Dan Didio's negatives, the one thing you've got to say is at least there was something going on in terms of an overall narrative. And you had somebody who was the face of the company out there actively promoting the product, but you don't see Jim Lee doing that. You don't see any of the editors or the editor-in-chief or whoever. I don't even know who those people are anymore, but you don't see anything like that happening. And then you see a lot of decisions being made that are not driven based on what fans really want, but based on what public perception is going to be about the company because we do X versus are people actually going to support it? You know, in talking about the Green Lantern series, one of the defenses I keep hearing about the run is, you know, it's really not selling all that well, but it's selling around the same as season 2 of the Grant Morrison run. So people are like, well, you know, it's selling as good as Morrison did. You know, what's the problem? Well, the problem is that the Morrison run wasn't being promoted by DC at all. And it was a very divisive run. So if you're aiming for the middle and you're achieving your results, but is this really what you want for a franchise which at one time outsold pretty much every other franchise DC had? So in terms of my predictions and stuff, I don't think we might see Jeff Thorne stick around a little while after issue 12, but I don't think he's going to be here by the end of the year. I don't think he'll be in the book. I think we'll have a different Green Lantern book. I also think we're going to have 2 Green Lantern books by the end of the year. Some of the rumors I've heard is that apparently one time Robert Venditti did a pitch and that got turned down in favor of the Thorne pitch. But the other thing I've heard is that Tom King had a pitch, and rumor I've heard is that maybe that's where we're going. I don't know. But it's some things I've heard, both on the internet and from people that I know kind of on the inside a little bit. So I wouldn't be at all surprised to see kind of a change of direction because this book has not been the hit that I think people thought it was. And I don't blame that all on Thorne. I blame a lot of that also on DC proper because Thorne's pitch wasn't what we're getting. Thorne's pitch was just the Jon Stewart book. And he's being saddled with this other half of a story that he's got to come up with that wasn't what his original idea was. And he's trying to carry that narrative. I think if this had been a Jon Stewart miniseries, it would probably have been better received. But even then, there are things that are going on in the story which are just not terribly interesting to me. And I think to a lot of other people. I think there are people that do enjoy it, but I think there's a lot of people buying it out of obligation more than pure enjoyment.
See, I think DC's their best plan at this point with maybe Green Lantern is, you know, you need a big name writer on this kind of book. You know, somebody who draws a lot of clout. You know, like your Kings or your Mitch Gerards or your Tom Taylors. You know, you need a big name player to write a big time book. I mean, look at Scott Snyder and Batman. You know, that dude wrote that book for how long? I mean, the man knows the character, and you know, and that's what I think a Green Lantern book needs is somebody who knows the character or can write long enough for it. It's like Venditti. He wrote Green Lantern for so long. We got a version of Hal Jordan that, you know, went through a lot of changes, but overall, we had a really, really good version of Hal Jordan the whole entire time with Venditti's writing.
Yeah, I think DC kind of mismanaged the property when Jeff Johns left. At one time, you know, you had a property and Jeff Johns was starting his rise to stardom, essentially, on the Green Lantern book and in the Flash and JSA before that, you had a series that was doing so well. And when he left, kind of some of the wind came out of the sails, but what you brought in, and this is no slight on Robert Venditti, I think he's a fine writer, but he wasn't a big name at the time. Yeah, he'd done Exo Manowar, but that was really about it.
Right.
Van Jensen, who was brought in, is a friend of Robert Venditti's, and Van Jensen had never written a mainstream comic. And you put him on Green Lantern Corps, which was a top 50 book. And so, and basically when he started, he had to work with Venditti. He wasn't even on his own because this was new for him. And again, I'm not belittling either one of them as a creator, but if I'm managing this franchise, I would try to bring in, somebody who's got a name, as you said, a Kurt Busiek or a Robert Hickman or somebody who brings a name to the game, essentially, to help carry it forward. And you maybe could have gotten away with a Robert Venditti on the Green Lantern Corps book, but not the lead book. And especially when his first story, which wasn't his strongest, but his first story was the whole thing with, having the power rings be not an unlimited source of energy, and trying to tell a story where every time a Green Lantern uses their ring, they're essentially doing something to harm the universe. And when the energy runs out, the universe is going to die. It kind of flies in the face of what the Green Lanterns are all about.
Right. Good point.
So it was not well received. And then he made Green Lantern. He made Hal the head of the Corps, and then made fun of him over it, which wasn't a good take either. So you had a couple of bad things, which led to people not having a good taste in their mouth. So I think they can rebuild the brand, but it's going to take some energy and effort. And I don't know whether I trust DC's leadership, what there is, to be able to know what to do with the property.
You got it.
All right. That said, like I said, I think we're going to see some changes this year. And like you, I'm a little worried about DC just because, we just saw in the news this week that Warner Brothers is looking to unload the CW. So are we going to see, I think DC right now, from Warner Brothers' perspective, is really just an IP farm. I don't think they really care about the comics.
I got news for you, man. The CW, man, that's their cash market. That's where they get a lot of their money from.
Right.
Those shows do well.
I would bet that CW makes more money from Warner Brothers than DC Comics does.
I would probably stand behind that. You're probably not wrong, man.
But I don't see them selling it because you wouldn't want to give up those licenses of those characters. But I can see them potentially shuttering DC Comics and licensing the products out to be done, much like Disney does with Star Wars. You have Dark Horse or IDW or Marvel do Star Wars books. I can see DC doing the same thing with DC Comics, with Warner Brothers doing that with them. But I'm not saying that's what's going to happen, but I can see it happening.
That'd be a shame, too.
It would. Well, my friend, my power ring is really blinking a lot now, urgently. Right. So let's take a quick pause, and when we come back, let's jump right into listener feedback.
This is Robert Venditti, and you're listening to the podcast of OA.
Our first message is from Corey, who is asking about the Millennium event from 1988. Transmitting in 3, 2, 1.
Hi guys. While I was coming to the end of reading the Green Lantern Volume 2 run, I decided to read all of the crossover issues of Millennium. Leading up to Millennium, I didn't realize how GL-centered that crossover event was going to be. The Manhunters are one of my favorites, so it was cool to have them as the main villains in this huge event. What are your thoughts on Millennium? Was it well received at the time, or has it just faded into obscurity like big crossover events sometimes do? Also, did you read the new Guardians series that spun out of Millennium? Keep up the great work and keep your power rings charged.
Hey Corey, good to hear from you. Wow, Millennium. So, it's been a while since I've read that book. Of course, and it's funny when these guys, when all the people write in or when they leave voicemails and stuff like that, and they bring up little snippets of stuff that they're reading or stuff that they have read, it almost like immediately when they do that, I put that on my checklist on what we should do for a retro review. and then I come to find myself, well, hell, I got like this whole entire list going on for retro reviews, but sadly we don't have enough time to go through all these retro reviews. But yeah, the Manhunters are one of my favorites too. Always been a big fan of them. I really liked what that 3-issue art that not the same as the Black Star, sorry. But I really liked when we did the retro review with Jeff Johns, and then we read about the Manhunters during that time. And New Guardians, I was a big fan of the New Guardians. I liked Kyle Rayner, I still do, and I liked all the different rings being in that book. And I thought it was a cool series. I was actually sad to see that one go.
Actually, he's not talking about that New Guardians.
Oh, he's not. He's talking about something else?
He's talking about the New Guardians series that spun out of Millennium.
Oh, so sorry, Corey. I got ahead of myself.
Well, it's interesting because it's a similar title. It was called The New Guardians.
Right.
So it's an easy thing to get confused. But yeah, after Millennium came out, that was in 1988. And that was done by Joe Staton and Steve Englehart. And that series, it was interesting because it was done weekly for 8 weeks, for 2 months. And it was one of the, so this was the third big event for DC. You had Crisis on Infinite Earths, then you had Legends, then you had Millennium, and they had Steve Englehart and Joe Staton do it, and it was Green Lantern centric. And it tied into almost every other book, like I said, in the DC universe. And the big thing, this was like the start of the events of, well, let's do these big crossovers, tie everything in, make people want to buy it with some kind of a gimmick. And so the gimmick was that the Manhunters had infiltrated Earth because there were going to be these new Immortals, these new Guardians from Earth, and they were there to try to put a stop to it. And so there were these secret agents or moles in every series. So the writers of all of the books had to come up with a character that was going to be outed as either being mind controlled or being, a robot agent kind of thing, undercover, that kind of thing. And like Lana Lang was one of the people that came out in one of the Superman books, that she was an agent under mind control of the Manhunters. You had every book tied in. So it was a success in terms of sales because the marketing ad behind Millennium was like, one of these 3 characters is a spy. Which one is it? And it would show you characters from different books, and it would make you want to buy those books to find out who's the secret mole kind of thing.
Interesting.
So that was part of it. It didn't really have any lasting effects. The whole point of this was when Green Lantern ended and it became Green Lantern Corps, and Steve Englehart destroyed the power battery. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? Destroyed the power battery, and only a handful of Green Lanterns were left, and they were living on Earth. And that was what was going on. And the Zamorans and the Guardians left. They left our universe, and they left one Zamoran and one Guardian behind. And they came to Earth and said, we're about to give powers and things to representative of all the different races and cultures on Earth. And they're going to inherit all these powers, and they're going to become the new Guardians who are going to give birth to a new race of Immortals. And that was kind of the whole crux of it. And one of the members of the New Guardians was Tom Kalmaku, who was given...
I was going to say, I remember Tom Kalmaku being there.
Tom Kalmaku was there. The Pharaonic Man, he was made one of them. The guy who's the plant human creature, he was made one of them. And then there were a bunch of new characters. And I remember at the time Steve Englehart took some flack because he tried to do one of the first homosexual characters in comics, but DC at the time wouldn't allow the person to be openly gay. So he tried to not so subtly hint that Extrano, who was a Peruvian magician, who was also HIV positive, and remember this is 1988, so right. Having a character who was HIV positive was quite a thing. But publication standards at the time were such that the homosexuality could only be implied. So Englehart kind of went too far in the other direction to imply that Extrano was a homosexual and making him very flamboyant, very, very much stereotypical. And so he took a lot of flack over that. And this Harbinger was used in this. There were a bunch of other characters that they made up, and they were very representative of the entire human race. There were people there was a woman from Australia. There was a Chinese woman. There was
also a white supremacist from what I remember.
There was a white supremacist from South Africa. Yes, you're right. So there was some controversy in some of the characters that Englehart was trying to write about different things and some of the differences in our cultures, and some things didn't go over so well in DC. I think it's interesting that between Millennium and the New Guardians, it was the last work that Steve Englehart did for DC Comics from 1988 until the year 2000 when he came back to DC Comics.
Wow.
And he left. He was supposed to be doing first of all, they wanted to cancel the Green Lantern Corps book because they wanted to use Hal in Action Comics Weekly. And so Steve Englehart was upset because they were taking the Green Lantern book away from him. Then after Millennium was over with, and it was a sales success, it's not really well regarded today, and pretty much everything has been thrown out the window. But he and Joe Staton went on to work on the New Guardians. And in the second issue of the New Guardians, there was a supervillain named Snowflame who gained powers from the use of cocaine. So after the second issue, he left the book.
Whoops.
Yep. And the book only lasted 12 issues.
I bet you these writers do that stuff on purpose, knowing that they're not going to find a book. I mean, because I would, right? I mean, it's like, I'm going to put it in there. I'm just throwing this in there because I can. What do I care? Right?
I think Englehart, he took a lot of pressure from his fellow creators who were all told, hey, you've got to put a spy in your book to tie into this event. So I think he took some flack from that, and he got the whole backlash over the Extraño character. And then when he got to New Guardians, the final straw was having a character who was fueled by cocaine. And that was the last straw, that was the third strike. It was a neat story though. But yeah, it doesn't get referred to a lot. And obviously Tom McCalmackoo gave his powers up. And it was interesting because Tom didn't want to join the New Guardians. He didn't want to be a part of it, but he was given the ability to bring out the best in other people. That was his superpower.
Interesting. Very cool. Boy, these writers are like I said, man, when they write in, it's really, really cool because it brings back issues that just you haven't seen or heard from in a while, and it makes you want to go back and revisit.
Yeah, I remember reading. I still have my copies of Millennium, but I was checking my collection, and I don't have any copies of the New Guardians. I either got it and lost it somewhere along the way because I did lose some comics during a couple of moves when I was younger, and I don't know whether I lost it there or whether I just didn't buy them all the way through and got rid of them somewhere along the way. I'm not sure, but now I want to go back and pick them up just for the completionist in me. But I remember I was all excited because I'm like, oh, this is cool. There's going to be a Green Lantern eccentric story, and it was cool. You had kind of the subversion of the Manhunters kind of infiltrating different books, and I didn't buy all of the issues though. That's for sure. I think there were a total of 47 issues. That were part of the
a lot of tie-ins. I think there's a lot of tie-ins.
I think there were only 3 series that weren't part of the crossover. And that was because the Teen Titans was one of them. And they were this was back when the direct market was really kicking in. And they were in the direct market and they were doing a storyline at the time where it took place in the future. So they didn't want to tie that in. And then there were 2 or 3 other books that weren't tied into it. I don't remember which ones they were though. I think it was Swamp Thing was one of them. And The Question was the other one. And Vigilante, that one wasn't, because they were all mature reader titles.
Huh.
And I think the Warlord at the time had a book. And Warlord, DC promised fans that after the Legends crossover, because there was a big brouhaha over Warlord and the Legends being crossed over, that they would never do a Warlord in a crossover again. So they kept true to that. So they were left out. But other than that, all the other series at DC were all tied in. But yeah, all these writers had to come up with something to do. And some of them did it in a throwaway manner. Some didn't. It was a way for them to kind of realign certain things and get rid of certain characters. And it was interesting.
Very cool. Well, dang, Corey, that sparked the whole convo.
Absolutely.
We have to do a whole podcast on Millennium.
Yeah, we'll have to do one on that too. So Power Ring, I see we've got another message. So why don't you go ahead and give us, let us know what our next listener has to say.
Our next message is from Ken. Ken has some thoughts to share about Green Lantern John Stewart. Transmission incoming in 3, 2, 1.
Hey Myron and Phil, thank you for answering my emails and comments. With DC pushing John so heavily, I realized why I don't care for him, outside of him and the GL fan base still being defined by a 20-year-old show, even though Hal and Guy would get more significant screen time since then. John's a great character but not a good superhero. His most iconic stories are 20 to 30 years old, his suit is generic, do a color swap and it looks like 30 other superheroes, and his connections to fellow heroes are boring or forgotten. There's so much you can do with the character, but every time a writer like Van Jensen, Venditti, or even Mars tries to develop his character, it's instantly forgotten. Give him an interesting relationship with Fatality? Make her a Durlan, and even then she could have been a great villain. Make him an important mentor to Kyle Rayner and a great friend to Guy Gardner? He doesn't need them. Make him the damn leader of the Corps? Not put him in the league as the 9th important character. It's not that he can't be the best Lantern, but every time serious development is given to him it's instantly forgotten in favor of a 20-year-old version for him, and until this changes, he will never be worthy of the main GL title in my eyes. Also, that John has 0 villains to his name and DC keeps trying to make Sinestro his villain just pisses me off. You can say Guy has the same problem, but his personality is legendary and his interactions with characters like Hal and Batman are so iconic that in a lot of ways, they alone overshadow John's entire character. Also, I am very tired of Thorne trying to make John feel more important by making him more powerful and amazing like a selfish fanboy. I'm sorry, him saving a town single-handedly like a cowboy and becoming a god stronger than Superman is just ridiculous and makes Thorne a hypocrite after crapping over John's run. Johns would at least recognize and highlight the other Lanterns, instead of killing them unceremoniously and ignoring them. Also, Hal's moments of greatness felt earned and in character. John being shot by Darkseid and getting godlike power somehow? Not so much.
Hey Ken, thanks for your commentary. And you know, it's interesting because people, when they talk about John Stewart, they're really grafted onto the DC Justice League cartoon, the DC animated universe. And for people like ourselves who read John before that, we never saw John as the Marine. That was all grafted onto him for the sake of the cartoon. And the John Stewart in the cartoon isn't the same as the John Stewart that was in the comics at the time. And now the John Stewart we see today is kind of an amalgam of those two. And I think, like you said, it's difficult because none of the other Green Lanterns, other than maybe Kyle, have their own rogues. They try to graft on things from the Hal Jordan part of the mythology onto other characters. Like they've tried to make Sinestro a villain for John or for any of them for that matter. And it just doesn't work because while Sinestro's an enemy to all Green Lanterns, he's only an arch enemy to Hal.
Right.
And so, you know, I get that. And it's difficult, you know, when they try to develop the character, things are forgotten for John because there doesn't seem to be an overall strategy. And that's part of the problem I have with Simon Baz as well, is there doesn't seem to be anything for these characters. So why are they still hanging around if we're not doing anything with them? And you know, what are we doing? There's nobody to lead the charge. And sometimes, you know, you feel like are they going to get rid of some of these characters? I mean, there was a whole big blow up when DC at one time was talked about killing John Stewart, supposedly. I remember when I interviewed Ethan Van Sciver, gosh, must have been 8 years ago, almost 8 years ago now. And it was the 10th anniversary of Green Lantern Rebirth. And one of the things he mentioned was that DC had told Jeff Johns he could kill Kyle off. And Johns was like, no, I'm not going to do that to Kyle Rayner fans because, I mean, the people who are Hal fans that have been clamoring for Hal to come back, they felt bad because their favorite character was taken away. Why would I take away somebody else's favorite character? So it's interesting, but you know, I like his comment. You know, Guy has more of a personality and has more memorable scenes because of how over the top his personality was. And John is one of those characters that kind of blends into the background. Do I like the whole the godlike powers for Jon Stewart? No. I thought it was a mistake to give him guardian powers, because once you take somebody there, just like making Kyle a White Lantern, where do you go from there? You've got the character too overpowered. There's no place to go. You can't, if you go back, then it seems like you've kind of nerfed the character. So what do you do? I don't know. What are your thoughts?
Kyle's been just about everything.
Right.
Even Ion for a while.
Right. He was Ion. Then he was the White Lantern, and that plot line just got dropped like a hot rock.
Yeah.
It's unfortunate that there's no long range plan. Kyle was created to fit the bill, and then once he got beyond the rookie Green Lantern character, they had no plan for him. It's just like Jessica Cruz and Simon Baz. Where do you go with them? Jessica was all about overcoming fear, but she's kind of done that now. Now where do you go with the character? Now she's just another Green Lantern.
Yeah, I'd argue that's pretty much accurate.
And for the entire run that Jessica and Simon had, other than Volthoom, there wasn't really a villain established for them. They don't have a rogues. Now, when you see, there was the young adult book recently where Jessica Cruz is there. And where does the story take place? Coast City. Well, why is Jessica Cruz in Coast City going to school?
I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's just silliness. If you're going to make characters, build them up. Don't take something from another character and give it to this character to try to prop them up. It seems silly, and there's backlash. You're seeing a lot of backlash.
It's a disservice to the character.
Yeah.
Because then you're not building a character base. So you're trying to tell me that Jessica Cruz didn't come from anywhere, so you had to place her in Coast City, so she has to gain some identity from that? That's not fair to her.
Right.
I mean, yeah, I see what you mean.
Or, when we're talking about the Thorn run, we know he doesn't like Hal Jordan. Okay. That's a matter of public record at this point. But he's writing things in the story that doesn't make sense. For example, why would Simon Baz not say to Joe Mullane, hey, I know Hal was sent to Earth. He's the most experienced person. He's the most veteran person we've got in the Corps right now. Why don't we try to contact him?
Right.
But instead, you've got Joe Mullane sending out this anonymous message out there to say, if there's any Green Lanterns out there with a power ring, don't come to Oa. And Hal's not going to go to Oa after you say something like that and he hears that message. It's out of character for both Simon and for Hal.
And it goes back to what I said earlier about, a writer that knows the history, knows the character.
Right. And one of Thorne's thing is Ken points out is he was making fun of the Johns run, or throwing shade at Johns run, saying it was fanboy wanking, essentially. And this is no different than that. This run. So I don't know. I'm not sure what happens with John at the end of this story. Well, now that he's got these new powers, what is he going to be? I don't know. Can he go back to being a Green Lantern again?
Maybe he's going to be the apex Green Lantern.
Yeah, I don't know. It's a little scary because I don't think there's anybody at DC that cares enough to be in charge of the franchise. It's just unfortunate, but
it's very unfortunate.
It is, and I see frustration coming from both sides of camps. People who are Jon Stewart fans are like, finally he's getting recognized and he's getting a chance to do something, but is he getting to do something that is important, or is he getting to do something that's going to last? It all seems like a cheap plot and cheap ploy to put a spotlight on the character when there could have been so many better stories told. But
You're right.
I don't know. But anyway, Power Ring, thanks so much for the messages, and thank people out there, you guys that are listening and sending us questions and comments and feedback. To us, it's very important. A, gives us more things to talk about, and B, lets us know that you're out there and listening, and that you're sharing in the community that we're trying to build. So that's really important to us. So Power Ring, why don't you tell everybody else listening how they too can be a part of the show?
You can become a part of the show by leaving a message up to 1 minute long on our voicemail line. Call us at 406-POD-OA. That's 406-763-6362. You can also email us at podcast@blogofoa.com. We'd love to hear from you.
In blackest day or brightest night, watermelon, cantaloupe, yada yada, a superstitious and cowardly lot, with liberty and justice for all.
Then again, maybe I should lead us. In brightest day, in blackest night, no evil shall escape my sight. Let those who worship evil's might beware our power, Green Lantern's light.
Yay, team!
All right, welcome back. Episode 203, done and over with. Been a while since we recorded, so it was kind of nice to stay on here for a little while.
Yeah, I'm glad we got a little extra time. We spent a little extra time talking about stuff because it's been a while, and I feel like we owe it to people that we haven't been there to do the content, and there's been woefully lacking Green Lantern content. I hope people are in our absence are making sure to listen to some of the other Green Lantern podcasts that are out there. The Lantern Cast and Emerald Echo, and I think there's a third one too. I don't remember just now, but I think there's a third one out there floating about. So I hope people are giving them a listen as well as tuning in. It's interesting because there are different viewpoints. I think if you listen to the Lantern Cast, they were very down on the Morrison run, where you and I were kind of up on the Morrison run, and we're very down on the Thorne run. And I don't know if they're really up on the Thorne run, but I know they've been a little more positive than we have been about the Thorne run.
But that's what makes the world go round, man. It's just, everybody has opinions, And as long as you're cool about how you share them, there's no harm, no foul. Right. And it's okay to be critical, and it's okay to like it. It is. I agree.
All right, my friends. Well, we will be back, I promise, in not too distant future. We've got some issues of Green Lantern to catch up on, and I think next week is when the next issue comes out, or the week after. So we'll make sure to do that, and we'll do a 3-issue. We'll cover 8, 9, and 10, and get ourselves about caught up with the Green Lantern run as well. And then we'll have to figure out what else we want to talk about. Maybe a Millennium. Maybe we'll go back to the Jeff Johns run. Who knows? Maybe we'll pull something out of the woodwork that people haven't talked about in a long time.
Like Corey said, Millennium. I haven't talked about that one in a long time.
Yeah, that's one that nobody seems to talk about at all. So that might be a good one to go back and revisit. So until next time, everybody take care of yourselves. Be safe, please. Be good to each other. And make every day your brightest day. The Podcast of OA is the official podcast of the Blog of OA and a proud member of the Comics Podcast Network. Share your comments and questions by calling the show's voicemail line at 406-POD-OA. That's 406-763-6362. You can send your emails to podcast@blogofoa.com. You can also find the Blog of OA and the Podcast of OA on Twitter and Facebook. Green Lantern and other related characters are the copyrighted property of DC Comics Incorporated and are used without permission. The Blog of OA and the Podcast of OA are fan productions and do not claim any ownership over the Green Lantern or any other copyright.